Hello, welcome to the Coffee People podcast. Just wanted to let you know that if you go to roastar.com and you use the code bundled up, you'll get 10% off for the rest of March because it's freaking cold out. And here in Southern California, it's wet and cold. So code bundled up, 10% off, roastar.com. Can't go wrong. Hey everyone, I'm the host of the Coffee People and Coffee Smarter podcasts, Ryan Woldt. We don't do advertisements during our episodes, and that is thanks to the support we receive from Roastar Coffee Packaging. Please check them out at roastar.com. That link in the show notes or in our newsletter. And now, on to the show. But I'll get started. We'll just say hello to everybody. Welcome to the Coffee with podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Woldt. The show is presented by Roastar Coffee Packaging, which you can find online at roastar.com in collaboration with One Wildlife Co. Go to roastwestcoast.com to find recaps of our episode, our Coffee People, Coffee Smarter shows, so much more. And if you haven't poured yourself a cup of coffee, now is the time to get started. Today's episode is special because we're sitting down with a guest from outside the coffee industry. Ryan Laemel is the COO, Chief Operating Officer, I believe, at Protect Our Winters, a nonprofit based out of Boulder, Colorado, although he's in Basalt, Colorado. You might remember me mentioning them as our charity of the month for February. And so I encourage you to sit and just listen to this conversation. But since I know myself and I know you, you're probably on your phone. You can also go to protectourwinters.org while we're chatting. You'll find that link in our show notes and, on our website. Just scroll down. It'll be there. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad you're here.
Hey, it's great to be with a fellow Ryan, and I'm thrilled to be here.
I don't see you at the regular meetings, but I'm sure we must have different chapters.
Yeah, exactly. The Ryan chapters.
You just mentioned to me that you're drinking a cup of coffee. Do you have a coffee roaster in the area you like or a coffee shop?
Yeah, I have plenty. I'm married to a Colombian, and so we especially love Colombian coffee and have our favorites that we bring over when we make trips there. But locally, here in the Roaring Fork Valley where I live, I love Rock Canyon. They're a great roaster out of Newcastle, and they've been a partner of POW in the past. And yeah, I also love tea as well. We have a great tea company here that POW partners with as well. Two Leaves in a Bud. They're based out here in Basalt as well. So whether it's coffee or tea, I'm a fan, but I generally stick to my pour over or a cortado. Those are my favorites.
Well, now that I know that you like Colombia coffee, I'm going to send you a bag of our Yeah No Yeah coffee collab that we did, which is a Colombia blend.
Well, I see you have another partner of ours on your shelf as well. We work really closely with Doma, and we've done the series of deep coffee roast. So also a big fan, and we've had that at a lot of our events. So it's cool to see that on your shelf as well.
Not an accident. Although it's there all the time. I learned about Protect Our Winters because of this coffee at Doma.
Awesome.
I had the team from Doma on, or some of their members, and they were talking about it as part of that show a few years ago. Ryan, normally I would do this whole backstory of how you got into coffee and all that, but I think I'm a little more interested in how did you get involved in Protect Our Winter, and what is Protect Our Winter?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think Doma is a great transition because they are committed to sustainability, climate education, and also policy work that goes beyond their roastery. So I'm thrilled to see them on your shelf. And yeah, how did I get involved in climate and energy, and what is POW? I've been working in this space for a little over a decade. And when I started, sustainability was not a career path that most people were thinking about. I studied geology and geophysics, and most people said I should work in the oil and gas sector. I had a moral dilemma with that and ultimately started my career in sustainability, got more into climate policy, and then ultimately started working in clean energy around the world. And when I moved out to this area about 10 years ago, I started living in the mountains and I found that I really loved these special places that all of us frequent. I quickly fell in love with skiing, which I didn't grow up doing, but now I love doing on foot, hiking uphill and getting into the backcountry. And I also fell in love quickly with ice climbing and rock climbing. And so I quickly noticed, even around here, that our winters were changing. And some seasons, especially the ice season, felt like it was getting more and more compressed over time. And I noticed that this group, Protect Our Winters, was doing phenomenal work, and particular about trying to leverage the motivation that people like you and me and probably many of your listeners have to act on climate and to protect the places that they love, but potentially asking themselves, like, what do I do? How do I get involved?
I
And
ask
so,
myself that every day.
yeah. And so what POW is, we're an environmental nonprofit and we're really trying to be the voice and the movement for the outdoor community to take action on climate.
When you say to be the voice, one of the things that I think POW does that is hard to do as an individual is policy work, working with
Mm-hmm.
governments, being kind of a getting into some of the nitty gritty of things that I just don't understand. Like I understand like I should recycle, I should be aware of my impact, all of those things and the things I can do in my small little circle. How does being the voice give you a greater impact, so to speak, than maybe one person can do alone?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think here at POW, what we're ultimately trying to do is build a large movement of people within the outdoor community who are interested in taking action on climate. And there are studies that show that there's 175 million of us in the United States alone who participate in outdoor recreation every year. And the
I'm
outdoor
sorry,
recreation, go ahead, yeah,
175 million?
175 million. And our economy for outdoor recreation is $1.2 trillion per year. So, what we've realized and what our founder, Jeremy Jones, realized, who's a professional snowboarder, is this community, this group of people, could be a powerful group if they could be well organized and advocate, use their voices to advocate for systemic change. We 100% believe in living an examined life at PAL. And so I think about whether I need to take that trip or not, or whether I can have that same climbing experience in my backyard. And we also think about, like, should I purchase an internal combustion engine, like a gas or diesel powered vehicle, or should I purchase an EV if I have the ability to do so? Or maybe even I should take the bus to get to the ski mountain, which we're really lucky here in the valley I live, and I can do that. But that only gets you so far. And I also used to work in clean energy and sustainability consulting and worked with a lot of companies who were taking action within their own internal operations to remove carbon pollution from their operations. So they were purchasing renewable energy, they were changing their vehicle fleets for electric vehicles, they were investing in their buildings to make them more energy efficient. But at a certain point, you reach an area where those investments start to become challenging. They get more expensive, they get harder to do on your own. And so that's when I tell people the most cost effective thing your business can do, the most cost effective thing you can do to be a climate advocate is to use your voice. And so when we talk about using our voice at POW, what we ultimately mean is going to policymakers. That could be elected officials like your local representatives in Congress. It could also be your town council. It could also be a trip that we make to DC, which we do regularly. But taking that trip, using your voice, and advocating for policy changes that are systemic, that can ideally change the way our energy economy works.
I grew up watching Jeremy Jones videos. I'm a Burton guy though, so I hope he doesn't, get upset with me. You mentioned this kind of bigger vision and this
Hmm.
this collective group. I think a good example on the other side of that might be like the NRA, right? They're a collected group of gun owners who speak with one voice, and that carries a
Yeah.
lot of weight. And what you were just saying about outdoor recreation, as I was kind of running through my head, is like, oh, well, it's not just snowboarders, it's skiers, it's hikers, it's climbers, it's joggers, it's cyclists, that, and if each of those groups did their own thing, that's great. But when you put them together, it's a bigger wave, right? Surfers,
Yes.
throw in that group. I was reading a little bit on your website about something called the theory of change,
Hmm.
and in particular, uh, finding the right moment to act.
Yeah.
How do you how do you define the right moment to act when it feels like every day we're seeing stories about climate or seeing the impacts of weather? I think about weather when I travel. I mean, I don't get on a plane without checking the weather anymore or drive across the country. I think about it all the
Yeah.
time without even realizing that's part of this. Climate and weather are separate. I'm going to go to the website or the newsletter, everyone, and I'll put some differentials there. But how do you find this moment is the tipping point versus that moment? I mean, as a group.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll share a little bit more about our founding story, and then I'll
Okay,
share I'll share about how we pick those specific moments.
great.
So I mentioned earlier, like Jeremy Jones founded POW in 2007, and I think his realization was that one, we were losing the battle in protecting our winters, and the science was very clear, but we needed a community of people that could take action to persuade policymakers to do their job to protect our planet. And ultimately, over the past 18 years, we've been working to build that community. And now our mission at POW is to mobilize that community to take action on climate. And the way we really do that is with the 4 alliances that we work with. So we work with 200 professional athletes, 100 brands, 50 artists, and 40 scientists to do our work. And what that work is telling inspiring stories about the outdoors and why we should protect the places that we love. It's also educating and training people on the basics of climate science and climate solutions. And then, lastly, we do a lot of work around policy and campaigns. So we were in DC even after the election result, and we met with 33 different members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. And I love that about POW. Jeremy's been clear about that from the start, that we need to engage across the aisle. And in terms of how we think about like what ideas we're going to be engaging our audience with, we try to think about this in terms of like, how do we prioritize what makes sense for us at PAL? And the way I think about this is, first, like, it has to be a major climate or environmental issue. So for example, like, a lot of people will talk about aviation, like air travel, and that is an important sector for us to be working on, but it's 2% to 3% of global carbon emissions. Whereas if we think about how our power is generated or how our transportation works, like how we get from point A to point B, those tend to be 20+% of emissions in the US per sector. And so we really want to be tackling those sectors that are 20 or 30% of global emissions. So, like, what's a big problem that we can tackle? The other piece we think about are like, what is an imminent threat? Like, what do we have to protect because potentially another group is not interested in that particular area of progress on climate or clean energy? So this could be as small as your backyard. There's a lot of quote unquote NIMBYism in the environmental movement. Not in my backyard. I don't want that project in my backyard. That's an imminent threat that a solar project could face.
Mm,
A larger example of that is perhaps there is a particular group within Congress that does not want to support policies that would either level the playing field or potentially even incentivize certain clean energy technologies. So we're constantly monitoring, like, what are those threats? And then lastly, we think about what's close to home for us, like what resonates with the POW community. We have, 98,000 members of our member organization. We're not quite rivaling those NRA numbers that you mentioned earlier, Ryan, but we are working to build our community over time. And we know what they care about. They care about protecting public lands. They care about clean energy in their backyards. And they care about, like, the local activities that they participate in, from angling to hunting to, riding on snow, like we were talking about at the beginning. So we try to identify, like, where the sweet spot is between those three areas of, like, big climate problem, potentially under threat, and then also close to home for our community. And if there is an opportunity for us to collaborate with our athletes, our brand partners, and others, like, that for us is really the sweet spot of how we pick those opportunities.
You mentioned talking to lawmakers on both sides.
Yeah.
I get those emails from all kinds of nonprofits, but REI does a bunch of them. I think I've gotten one from you guys recently. Take action, sign this letter to your local constituents, your lawmakers. Do those really, it seems like, so like, oh, I click a couple buttons, here's the thing. Does that actually work? Do lawmakers see that and go, oh, there are people that are involved or care? I mean, you're obviously going to them with this, the weight of your organization behind them. But for the individual, it kind of just feels like it's almost too easy. Like, this probably doesn't have an impact. I mean, as the individual who's listening to this show or who's looking at the website, like, how much impact can I really have,
Hmm.
in that way?
Yeah. Well, I think there's such a relationship between climate and democracy. And in the US, like, we're so fortunate to have a democratic process that we can engage our elected representatives in. And ultimately, think about the incentive structure for these elected officials, right? They want to be reelected, and they need to hear from their constituents, us, about what we care about. And one of our former board members, his name's Auden Schindler, he wrote a great book recently called Terrible Beauty. And in that book, and from his own personal anecdotes, he talks about some of these moments. He is currently the senior vice president of sustainability at Aspen One, who's one of our brand partners. And 10 years ago, the valley that Aspen operates in and that I live in had the majority of its power coming from coal and coming from what's called a rural electric cooperative called Holy Cross. And when Auden and others spoke to our local elected officials in Grand Junction and other parts of Colorado, many of them said, I haven't heard about this desire from constituents. No one's come into my office in these more red parts of Colorado. No one's come into my office and said they want clean energy. They want action on climate. I haven't heard that message. You're one of the first people to tell me that message. And so it's great to hear from you. And the same is true for the local electric provider that we have, Holy Cross. Like, they have a board. That board is elected, and those board members are responsible for deciding the power supply mix that we receive in this valley. And so if those board members hear from their members, every one of us in this area is a member of that electric provider, that we want clean energy, they take action. And today, more than 70% of the power from Holy Cross comes from solar and wind and batteries, because it's the most cost-effective form of power for them. It is the most affordable and the easiest, fastest to deploy option for them. And so when we use our voice, whether it's the local electric company or with our congressional officials, they actually do listen to us. And I know it may feel like a small action, but when we take a lot of people and all take that small action together, that's when we can start to see like the type of snowball effect that we want to see at POW. So I really believe in using our voice, but our challenge is to make sure that that voice is heard and that we hold our elected officials accountable for what we ask them to do.
You mentioned the alliances program and strategic partnerships. A term that I learned from a video that I watched starring Amy Engerbretson, excuse me, Amy, called "The Hypocrite," was imperfect advocacy, and it directly speaks to a question I think a lot of people who are passionate about the outdoors and environmentalism and sustainability, but also want to be out doing things, faces, which is, is it hypocritical for me to say that I want these things, but also go and do these sports which have impact? We're all inherently impactful, and it can get overwhelming to start going into the details of it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to people who are like, man, I'd almost feel like it's counterintuitive, but like, they're like, man, I would support Protect Our Winters or organizations like yours, but I'm part of the problem, so it would be hypocritical of me to do so. Or I'm out there, on your website, and I apologize to call you out. You recently put out this article about banks.
Yep.
Is the bank that you bank at, contributing to climate problems? What are they doing with their money? The money that you're saving there and generating interest on, or however you're working with them. And there's this kind of good place problem where some of the banks on that list, which are like better necessarily for the environment, meaning they're not investing in coal or climate issues or climate impactful industries, also got their start by offering auto loans, and their business is predicated on auto loans. And so, well, some of those might be electric now, but certainly not all of them. So there's always going to be this, I do this one thing and it feels like the right thing, but then there's this unexpected impact. What do you say to people who are struggling with that climate guilt?
Yeah, I think it's completely reasonable to feel that way. And I think often we feel climate anxiety, right? Like you can see wildfires happening in places like LA, given the extreme drought that they experienced and the winds, the Santa Ana winds that were amplified from a warmer climate. And you can also look at places like North Carolina that experienced, a terrible flooding event during this past year and during the hurricane cycle. So I think people feel climate anxiety, and they're also seeing it happen either in their neighborhoods or to loved ones in their communities. So I think feeling guilt is completely reasonable. And I think we have to ask ourselves, like, don't let the enemy, how do we not let the perfect be the enemy of the good? And in this case, like, we have to remember this concept of imperfect advocacy. Amy and others talk about this, but we've been sold this narrative that our carbon footprint, our emissions are what's causing climate change. And that's true. Like, we are inextricably linked to many fossil fuels in our society. And 70% of emissions come from just about 100 companies. And many of those companies tend to operate in the fossil fuel industry. And I'm not saying that we need to remove all fossil fuels tomorrow. Even the best forecasts often show that there will be some gas still in our system in 2050. And that's because there is demand for it. People are driving vehicles that use gasoline, for example, or we have plastic products that we use, like our poles to go skiing, and those are made from petroleum. Even products that we use every day, like a lip balm, ultimately, many of them do have petroleum in them. So we're still really inextricably linked to that, but that doesn't mean that we can't take other actions in our day-to-day lives. And I think, you can take small actions yourself. So I think about our own banking journey at POW, which you brought up earlier. Like, we work with a regional bank in Colorado, and they are not as as good as the best banks out there, like a Climate First Bank of Florida or Amalgamated or Better State Bank. Those banks are often about 15 to 50 metric tons of CO2 per $1 million invested. Our bank is about 100, and the big four banks in the US are typically about 300. So I put us in that like better category, but we're certainly not the best. And so we have to ask ourselves, can we take actions in other areas on the path to becoming best in class? And so what we do with our own practices are, one, we offer a great retirement plan for our employees that offers options to invest in companies that are solving the climate crisis and divest from companies who are contributing to it. And we work with a group called Carbon Collective to do that. Similarly, like as most nonprofits do, we have some cash that we don't need tomorrow, longer term cash, and we try to invest that. So we make sure that the people who donate to us, their money is not just sitting in a bank account. We're investing it smartly, but with a really low risk profile because we're a nonprofit. And so we work with an investment advisor who helps us invest in municipal bonds that are specific projects in local communities that are renewable energy projects, energy efficiency upgrades for buildings, or even electric buses for a town. We can pick those projects that we're investing in. They give us good returns, like 4 to 5% returns. And then lastly, like we are also looking at our business insurance. We work with a group called Premiums for the Planet, and they help you broker insurance with providers who are committed to solving the climate crisis. And they also use their voice for advocacy as well. So just because our bank isn't perfect doesn't mean we can't take action in these other areas. And we are also trying to talk to those best in class banks. We already started that conversation about how we can eventually start working with them. And it sounds like they can provide the services that we need as a nonprofit. So I wouldn't treat it as like all or nothing. I would tell people like, 1,000-mile journey starts with one step, and you've just got to take that first step. And just because maybe you ride a snowmobile or fly somewhere doesn't mean you can't go show up at a town hall meeting or call your elected representatives and let them know that you want clean energy, because these are big systems that we're trying to change. And we need a lot of small decisions to add up to changing those big systems.
When you started kind of that explanation, you used the term "our" a couple of times. I just want to clarify. You're talking about the individual. I mean, protect our winners, yes, but like,
Yeah.
our as an individual, our impact is only so great, and thinking about the actions, being intentional. I think you referred to earlier about where you put your money or where you're shopping or what you're supporting or when you need something, or it's a benefit to your life and your personal health. I think about that a lot with I travel to snowboard, right? And how am I going to do that? Am I going to fly? Am I going to drive? Do I need to do that? Do I need to go to the farther mountain because it's my favorite? Can I do the closer one? Yes, those things matter, but systemically, it's like the going into a grocery store for me was like a tipping point. I was at one point, if I don't think I've ever said this, but I can be a little bit extremist about things. And there was like a good 10-year period where I don't think like we had plastic in our house for like hardly anything. I mean, I was really on top of it all the time, but it was also really exhausting. And it only worked because I had the time to devote to the process, to research what I was buying all the time or to go somewhere. And then I realized, well, I'm also going to like 3 different stores to get just the one thing. And so now it's just too deep of a problem. And I realized one day at the grocery store that there was more waste in that grocery store than I would probably generate, in 10 years, just in
Right.
that one store that one day. And so I couldn't let that get on top of me when making choices. I had to be able to also live and enjoy my life so that I could be a productive person who could then help address these issues if I had the opportunity. Uh, the Climate Advocates Guidebook.
Hmm.
I didn't get a chance to dig into it, but
Yeah.
where does that take us from here?
Yeah, great question. And I think this relates to what we were just talking about. Like, what action can you take? Like, what are you empowered to do? And I think if you think about that example you were just giving, like in the grocery store, it can feel paralyzing when you see that amount of waste. And it can also feel paralyzing when you try to put yourself in someone else's shoes, because we don't all have the same access to resources. We don't all have the same position. I recognize, like, I come from a position of privilege, and I'm able to contemplate whether I'm going to purchase a electric heat pump for my home. But for some people, that's a really big expense, and that upfront cost might not make it possible for them. But if you think about the bigger system that you're operating in, if you could just change the power supply, then we would all be operating our electricity consumption on a clean grid. And I think that's, like, we have to think about how we can accomplish that. And so for the Climate Advocates Guidebook, like, ultimately, climate advocacy is about trying to pass the policies that we want to see, and also trying to realize those outcomes, whether it's voting or calling an elected official. But we can't do that every single day, right? I think that is the toughest part that we all face. And so we have a set of solutions that people can dig into in the Climate Advocates Guidebook. They can, get the beta, which as a climber, means, like, basically the information that you need to solve the tougher parts of the problem, the climb that you're trying to get up. How do you get through that difficult move? And that for us is our newsletter. Like, stay in touch. We follow us on social media. Like, we are constantly sharing about the latest climate news, trends that we're seeing, and ways you can get involved. Secondly, we encourage people to examine their own lifestyle. You can look at your own carbon footprint. We have a calculator on our website to look at the footprint of your bank and the money that you invest through that bank. And you can make some of these small decisions today. You don't have to move all of your money tomorrow to a better bank, but you could move a little bit of your money and start making progress down that. We also encourage people to tell their own story in a unique way. So how do we actually make climate a regular trailhead or lift chair topic across the US? We should be sharing, like, the climate impacts that we think that we're experiencing in our backyards with a wide range of people. And sometimes people will not agree with what you're sharing, and that's fine. But we call that, rather than a call to action, a call to thought, a call to think, a call to think differently. Maybe you made a 1% difference in changing that person's perception on climate. And lastly, we give lots of opportunities for people to get involved in the work that we're doing and the work that others are doing. There's, like, some great lawsuits that are happening lately from groups like Surfrider. We do a lot of electoral work, especially during midterms and presidential election years. And so how can you actually host, like, a film screening, for example, in your backyard with some friends and even some people in your community that you don't see regularly? So you can have a discussion about whether people are going to get out and vote and what their plan is to vote. So our goal with the guidebook is to offer people really simple ways to engage, because sometimes, like I said earlier, it can feel a little paralyzing when you're in that grocery store seeing all of that waste happen. But we want to make it easy for people to take small actions. And we really believe that over time, those small actions allow us to take bigger actions as a community. It's like a muscle. We're trying to train how people engage civically on climate in the US and around the world.
The discussion with people that may disagree is an interesting one. There are people in my life that I'm close to who can argue about this topic pretty voraciously. I think that's
Yeah.
the word. Very quickly. But in general, we're not disagreeing that there is changes happening. It's usually a more of a one of us is trying to be right and the other one has to be wrong, as opposed to, or maybe we disagree on how we got here. But the reality is we are here and we are seeing that impact. My dad said to me once, and we have differing perspectives on the world, certainly quite different, but he said, I grew up on a farm, and if you ask any of the farmers around here, the weather is changing. Like their seasons are changing, and whether they agree or disagree on why, it doesn't matter. It's happening, and they have to react to it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something I've taken to heart, in that pointing out or asking people, how are you dealing with this change that we're experiencing? How is this impacting you? It has been helpful for me. Certainly, I'm not trying to tell anyone how to approach this, but for me, asking questions has been more valuable than
Hmm.
me saying, "Hey, this is what you should know, and this is why." Which I think it's more of an empathy as opposed to trying to get my point across, which is obviously right. Um, you mentioned earlier that you were married. Why I say that, because I think when I think about climate, family is important. My wife and I are not
Hmm.
having kids. And so there's this, I've had people ask, like, well, why do you care about the future? And so I'm wondering, and I have my own answer for that, but I'm wondering, what does
Hmm.
this work mean to you on a daily basis, like to emotionally to you, outside of your job? Why do you care? Why does this matter?
Yeah. Well, I think, we're really committed to being cross partisan at PAL and working, from the right to the left and in between. And I think for us, we often ask people, like, what issues do you care about? What are your values? And I think we often can agree on an outcome. I think we often struggle to agree on the motive. And so I usually tell people, like, try to think about what outcomes you want, and then what is a pathway to get there that we can ideally all agree on. So I care a lot about clean air and clean water and a healthy planet. That is our vision at PAL. And there may be debate about how exactly we get there. And there are many pathways to getting there. But I think when you ask people what they care about, they often care about the economy. They often care about a healthy environment. And so, how do we actually show people that the work that we're doing, like clean energy, is leading to the outcomes that they want? If you look at the main policy that the US has worked on over the past several years, called the Inflation Reduction Act, it's rolled out about $350 billion in public funds to support manufacturing, to create jobs, to support local clean energy projects. And if you look at where that funding's actually gone, about 85% of it has gone to Republican controlled districts. And if you look at how they're spending that money, they're spending it really efficiently. They're leveraging a lot of private sector dollars for every one of those federal dollars. And so for me, I'm really encouraged by that. Like, there is skin in the game in those districts, because those are opportunities for innovation and opportunities for jobs. And so for me, I always think about, like, what is the outcome that I want, and what's the outcome that we're gearing towards. And my wife and I, like, we want to have children, and that's a personal decision, like you said. And I want them to have the chance, like I do right now, to slide on snow. Or swing an ice tool into a frozen ice column, if that's what they want to do. And I want them to be able to experience those experiences in a similar way to how I am. And we have to make really significant changes in our economy to do that. And I also want to keep doing it myself, and I know that may sound selfish, but I think that's a really important motivator for many of us. We love these activities that we do, and we want to keep doing them in the same way we do them today. And I guess the last thing I'll add, like I've spent a lot of my life working in other countries. I spent a lot of time working in India in particular, and I worry about that part of the world more so than I worry about the part of the world where we live. I'm at 6,500 feet. Like it is going to get drier here. We are probably going to face more wildfires in the future, but we are in a pretty cool place and we have really great clean air. In many parts of India, temperatures are reaching 120 degrees Fahrenheit regularly in the summer now. They're breaking temperature records every year. 2024, right, was the hottest year on record, and the past decade's been the 10 hottest years on record. So I also do the work that I'm doing because of the people I've met throughout my life, from South America to India. Like I want other parts of the world who are probably going to face more significant climate impacts than we are here in the US to have a shot at, living the lives that they want to live without serious disruption. And I really believe that if we can deploy clean energy at the rate that we need to, which is about 2 big clean energy projects per day in the US, and if we can electrify our vehicles, which we're already starting to do, it's starting to be a cost-effective solution for people. And if we can change how we build our buildings, I really feel like we can have a planet that all of us, enjoy living on, and we protect that future that we all want to have. So the reason I do the work I do is, part of that motivation for myself and my family, and also the people I've met along the way.
What comes next? We're at the beginning of a new administration that is going to have new ideas, obviously. We've been seeing that play out. The Inflation Reduction Act you mentioned has
Mm-hmm.
got knocked around a bit already. What
Yes.
is the future for Protect Our Winters?
Great question. I think over the years, like we have realized we've been building the community, but we could probably build the community more consistently, more locally, and even potentially faster. I like to tell people we've been a little bit like a Colorado snowpack. Here in Colorado, it snows maybe every 2 weeks throughout the winter, and then you get this big dry period. And what that leads to is not the most stable snowpack over time. But in a place like California, in a maritime snowpack, it snows pretty consistently. I know this year's been a bit of an exception, but when you get that frequent, constant snow, you end up with a deep snowpack that is safe and fun to ride. And we want to start being the Sierra snowpack for our community. And what that ultimately means is, like, under this new administration, climate action has been under attack, as has diversity, equity, and inclusion, making the outdoors a place for everyone. And we worry about federal and international climate progress. But we've realized that this moment actually needs a different strategy to create sustained climate action. And it's got to be able to last beyond an administration. And so for us, what that looks like is trying to build power, no pun intended, within local communities. And so we have a variety of our athletes, brands, artists, and scientists throughout the US, but they tend to exist in some concentrated areas. So here in Colorado, Western Montana, Reno, Tahoe area, we have pockets of people. And we really believe that if we show up more consistently in those communities, we can create a movement within those communities that will show up for midterm elections, federal elections, and more. And so we are trying to build a movement within that outdoor state, the 175 million people who recreate outdoors every year in the US, where POW is meeting them in their backyards regularly. We're going to call this community hubs. And we're finishing up kind of building out the concept right now. We're fundraising for it, and our plan is to get at least 3 to 6 of these built by the end of the year, more in 2026. And I'd love to see, 10 plus of these throughout the country in the next several years. And what we're going to be doing there is a lot of regular monthly programming. Like, we held an uphill event here in Aspen recently where, as people walked uphill on their skis, they saw climate and energy facts, just 5 or 6 facts to start a conversation. It could also mean going to a local brewery and having a film screening by one of our artists on like how we can have, for example, climate conversations in purple districts, or why climate anxiety and microplastics is an area that we should all be talking about. And we want to see people show up with us, including our athletes and others, to town hall meetings. Often clean energy projects are happening right in our backyards. And the loudest voice, the people who show up to those meetings, just like a parent-teacher association meeting, they're the ones who decide whether that project gets a green light or gets stopped. And we believe our people can show up for those types of projects. And we also believe a lot of good policy for climate, can happen at the local and state levels. Many towns, cities, and states control zoning, which has a huge impact on what types of buildings we build, whether those buildings have solar panels on them or not. And we really want to meet people in their place, in their backyards, offer them the same training and education that we offer our alliances that we work with, and give them local, state, and federal opportunities to engage in climate action on a regular basis. And so for us, we're going to be trying to complement the great work that we do with our alliances with building a local grassroots movement through these community hubs, so that when we get to the 2026 midterms and the 2028 elections, we have a lot of collective power on the ground in these places.
I'm already nervous about election seasons. Election season never ends. I was talking to some friends in Canada, and they're like, you guys just never take a break. You just need to chill out a little bit. I know we covered a lot, especially our first time meeting and chatting about POW, and there's a lot for people to take in. Is there anything important that I missed that you wanted to share?
I think I'll add just 2 small points. I think the first is our beliefs at POW. We believe that this problem is solvable. We don't believe that we're in an energy emergency, like has been shared. We believe we're in a climate emergency, but we believe this problem is solvable. We have cost-effective solutions like renewable energy and electrification to get us there. And ultimately, we need a organized movement of people to make that change. And the outdoor state, as we call it, those 175 million people, we really believe they can be one powerful voice that, just like you said, that is up there with the ranks of the NRA in terms of power, in terms of its advocacy. So that's one point I'd want to share. And lastly, I would encourage you all listening to join Team POW. It is the best way to stay in touch with us, to hear what we're up to engage with our alliances. And over time, as we build out these community hubs, it'll be the place to find out when we're having an event locally, whether you want to attend a film screening, an event like a trail run or a local run in your area, or if you want to head with us. We're really going to be doing a lot of work to protect our public lands. We're going to be doing a lot of work to advocate for solar, wind, and other types of clean energy projects in your backyards. So it'll be a great chance for you to stay involved and show up with us.
Like my physical therapist recently said, it's the squeaky wheel always. You got to create a bigger squeaky wheel.
Yes.
My last question for you today, Ryan, and I got to say, I just really appreciate all the time. And I know it's a never ending effort. When you're passing through Colorado, maybe you pop off I-70 at one of my favorite coffee shops, Plume. Quick shout out to Plume. What are you going to order?
I always order a cortado if I can. I just find it's like the perfect balance of espresso coffee flavor with a little bit of milk. It's my favorite drink, and it pipes me up super well. And I am a big fan of burritos. So if there is a good burrito, I will gladly order that as well.
Well, I'm glad you were here, and I'm glad to have learned more. I mean, I'm a member of Team Powell, but I certainly learned quite a bit today, and we hope that anyone listening, if they have questions, reach out and check out the newsletter, and we'll have more information for you. Thank you, Ryan, so much.
Ryan, right back at you. Great to meet you. Great to be on the pod, and really grateful to you and your listeners for keeping the coffee flowing, and also hopefully keeping the power deep.
Hey there, everyone. Thank you for coming back for another episode of our podcast. That's the show for today. Thank you to our guest for sharing their time, their story, and for dropping some knowledge on all of us. You can find a recap of this episode in our newsletter online at roastwestcoast.com. That and all the links we chatted about today are in this podcast show notes. Wherever you're listening or watching, it really helps us if you tap the follow and subscribe button on the show. And while you're there, give us a few stars if you think we've earned them. If you want to go beyond that to support the Coffee People and Coffee Smarter podcasts, please tell your friends, share these shows, or buy us a cup of coffee. There's a link in the notes. We appreciate you. We couldn't do this without our presenting sponsor, Roastar Coffee Packaging, found online at roastar.com. They enable coffee businesses to best represent the quality coffee that they're producing. Besides enabling us to share these coffee stories, they also have a team of people who go above and beyond to ensure their customers get the support that they need. You can click the link to roastar.com in our show notes or reach out to us. We'll connect you directly. To all the industry partners who've supported us, who still support us, and continually uplift this effort to share the stories of coffee people, thank you. I feel like I don't say it enough, if that's possible, but also, thank you to everyone listening and watching this show for sharing a cup of coffee with us and for being coffee curious. This show, the Coffee People Podcast, is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network. And this episode has been written, produced, researched, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. Wherever you find yourself today, I hope it's with a fine cup of coffee. Thank you for listening to us share the stories of coffee people. Cheers, everyone.